The old man died at 11 minutes past midnight on Christmas Eve. His name was Lord Edward Ashworth, and for 63 years he had ruled Ashworth Manor with an iron will and a closed heart. He had outlived 2 wives, buried 1 son, and alienated the rest of his family so completely that when the doctor pronounced him dead, not a single person in the house wept. But someone smiled. I know this because I was there. My name is Catherine Ashworth, and Edward was my grandfather. I had not seen him in 7 years. I had not spoken to him in 10. And yet, 3 days before Christmas, a letter arrived at my London flat summoning me home. Come to the manor, the letter said. Come before it is too late. There are things you must know. Secrets that cannot die with me. I almost threw it away. Almost. But something in those words, something in the trembling handwriting of a man I had once loved and later learned to fear, made me pack a bag and board the train north. Now I stood in the entrance hall of the house where I was born, watching my family circle each other like wolves waiting for the weakest to fall. And I understood, with terrible clarity, that one of them was a murderer. Have you ever returned to a place you once called home and felt like a stranger? Have you ever looked at the faces of people who share your blood and wondered if you know them at all? Have you ever sensed that something terrible was about to happen, and known, deep in your bones, that you were powerless to stop it? This is the story of what happened at Ashworth Manor during the 3 darkest days of my life. It is a story about greed and betrayal and the lies families tell to survive. But it is also a story about truth. About courage. About the moment when you must choose between what is easy and what is right. By the end, you will know who killed my grandfather. You will understand why. And you will never forget the lesson his death taught me about the price of secrets kept too long. If you love stories that keep you guessing until the final moment, take a second now to subscribe to this channel. New mysteries arrive every week, and I promise you, this is only the beginning. Now, let me take you back to where it started. 3 days before Christmas. The moment I stepped off the train and saw my cousin Julian waiting on the platform. The train station at Lower Ashworth had not changed in the 7 years since I left. The same wooden platform. The same faded sign. The same bitter wind sweeping down from the moors, carrying the promise of snow. Julian stood beneath the awning, his hands shoved deep in the pockets of his overcoat. He was 34 now, 2 years older than me, but he looked 50. His face was lined. His eyes were tired. And when he saw me step off the train, his expression flickered through a dozen emotions before settling on something that might have been relief. Catherine. He walked toward me. You came. I came. He stopped a few feet away, uncertain. We had been close once, Julian and I. As children, we had explored every inch of the manor together, building forts in the East Wing, stealing biscuits from the kitchen, hiding from the adults in the secret passage behind the library. But that was before. Before the scandal. Before the exile. Before everything fell apart. I was not sure you would, he said. After everything. You wrote that letter on his behalf. Did you think I would ignore it? No. He shook his head slowly. I knew you would come. You were always the brave one. I do not feel brave. Neither do I. He picked up my suitcase without asking. The car is this way. I should warn you, the others are already here. All of them. And none of them are happy. The others. The word sent a chill down my spine that had nothing to do with the weather. Who exactly? Julian sighed. My mother. Your Aunt Margot. She arrived yesterday with her new husband, Gerald. He said the name like it was something distasteful. Your brother is here as well. Robert came in from Edinburgh this morning. Robert is here? Grandfather summoned him specifically. Along with someone else. Someone none of us expected. Who? Julian stopped walking. He turned to face me, and in his eyes I saw something that looked almost like fear. Evelyn, he said. Evelyn Gray. The name hit me like a physical blow. Evelyn Gray. My mother's sister. The woman who had been banished from this family 20 years ago for reasons no one would ever explain. That is impossible, I said. Grandfather would never allow Evelyn in this house. He swore she would never set foot here again. I know. But she is here. She arrived last night. And grandfather received her privately in his study for nearly 2 hours. Julian paused. Nobody knows what they discussed. But when she emerged, she was pale as death. And grandfather, he looked, I do not know how to describe it. Satisfied. Like a man who had finally set something right. Or like a man who had lit a fuse and was waiting for the explosion. Julian did not answer. He did not need to. We drove to the manor in silence. The roads were icy, the hedgerows coated in frost, the sky heavy with clouds that promised the snow would come before nightfall. I watched the familiar landscape pass by the window and felt the years fall away, memory layering over memory until I was not sure which version of myself was real. The child who had loved this place. The teenager who had fled from it. Or the woman returning now, summoned by a dying man who had spent his life pushing everyone away. Why now? I asked finally. After all these years. Why did he call us back now? Julian's hands tightened on the steering wheel. He is dying, he said. Has been for months. The doctors gave him until spring, but grandfather refused to go quietly. He said he had unfinished business. Debts to settle. Wrongs to right. He paused. I think he wanted to see us all one last time. To say goodbye. Or perhaps to confess. Confess to what? That, Julian said quietly, is what I am afraid to find out. The manor appeared around a bend in the road, and despite everything, my breath caught in my throat. It was exactly as I remembered. A sprawling Jacobean house of gray stone and mullioned windows, 3 stories tall with twin towers flanking the entrance and chimneys rising against the winter sky. The drive swept up between ancient oaks, their bare branches reaching toward the clouds like supplicants begging for mercy. In summer, the grounds were magnificent, acres of gardens and woodland stretching toward the river. But in winter, stripped of greenery, the house looked like what it was. A fortress. A prison. A monument to generations of Ashworth pride. Home, Julian said without enthusiasm. Is it still home? I asked. After everything that happened? It is bricks and mortar, Catherine. It is what we make of it. He pulled the car to a stop before the main entrance. Come. Grandfather is asking for you. Best not to keep him waiting. The entrance hall was exactly as I remembered. Dark oak paneling. A sweeping staircase with carved banisters. Portraits of Ashworth ancestors staring down from the walls with expressions of aristocratic disapproval. A fire burned in the massive stone hearth, but the warmth did not reach the corners of the room. It never had. A woman stood by the fireplace, her back to the door. She was tall and slender, dressed in black silk, her gray hair swept up in an elegant chignon. When she heard our footsteps, she turned. Aunt Margot. Catherine. She did not smile. She never smiled. You came. So everyone keeps telling me. Did you expect us to believe you would stay away? She walked toward me, her heels clicking on the stone floor. After grandfather summoned you specifically? After he made clear that your presence was, and I quote, essential to the reading of his will? I did not know about the will. Did you not? Her eyes narrowed. Then you are the only one. Before I could respond, a door opened on the far side of the hall, and a man emerged. He was tall and broad, dressed in an expensive suit that did not quite fit, with the florid complexion of someone who drank too much and exercised too little. Gerald Ashworth. Margot's third husband. A man I had never met, but had heard enough about to form an opinion. You must be the prodigal niece, he said, extending a hand. Gerald Ashworth. Delighted to finally meet you. His handshake was damp and lingering. I extracted my hand as quickly as politeness allowed. The pleasure is mine, I said, not meaning it. Grandfather is asking for you, Margot said. He has been asking since dawn. We had to sedate him twice. She paused. I suggest you go up before he exhausts himself entirely. First floor. The east bedroom. You remember the way. I remember everything. I turned and walked toward the staircase. Behind me, I heard Gerald mutter something to Margot, and her sharp reply, too low for me to catch. The house swallowed their voices. The house swallowed everything eventually. I climbed the stairs. Each step was familiar. Each creak of the ancient wood brought back memories I had spent years trying to forget. The wallpaper was the same. The scent of dust and old money and lavender polish. The way the light fell through the tall windows, gray and cold, illuminating nothing. At the top of the stairs, I paused. A woman stood at the end of the corridor. She was perhaps 60, small and slight, with silver hair cut short and practical. She wore a simple blue dress, and her hands were clasped before her in an attitude of quiet patience. Our eyes met. And I knew, without being told, that this was Evelyn Gray. The woman who had been erased from family photographs. The woman whose name had been forbidden in this house for 2 decades. The woman who held secrets that could destroy us all. You must be Catherine, she said. Her voice was soft. Musical. Nothing like what I had expected. You look exactly like your mother. You knew her. I loved her. Evelyn walked toward me, her footsteps silent on the carpet. She was my sister. My closest friend. And losing her was the worst thing that ever happened to me. Then why did you stay away? Why did you let grandfather exile you? Evelyn stopped a few feet from me. Her eyes were blue, I noticed. The same shade as my mother's. The same shade as mine. Because I had no choice, she said. Because the truth I carried was too dangerous to speak. And because your grandfather convinced me that my silence was the only way to protect the people I loved. And now? Now he is dying. And he has decided, at the last, that the truth must come out. She paused. That is why he summoned us, Catherine. All of us. Not for Christmas. Not for sentiment. But for judgment. Judgment? What do you mean? Before she could answer, a door opened behind us. Catherine. The voice was thin and reedy, but I recognized it immediately. The voice that had told me bedtime stories when I was small. The voice that had praised me when I learned to ride. The voice that had, 7 years ago, told me I was never to set foot in this house again. Grandfather. I turned. He stood in the doorway of the east bedroom, leaning heavily on a cane. He had aged terribly since I last saw him. His face was gaunt, his skin papery and pale, his once powerful frame reduced to bones and stubborn will. But his eyes were the same. Sharp. Cold. Seeing everything. "Come in," he said. "We have much to discuss. And very little time." I glanced at Evelyn. She nodded once, a small gesture of encouragement. Then she stepped back, disappearing into the shadows of the corridor. I walked toward my grandfather. And I stepped into the room where, in less than 48 hours, he would be found dead. The east bedroom had been my grandmother's before she died. The furniture was unchanged. The same carved wardrobe. The same dressing table with its tarnished silver brushes. The same portrait of Lady Eleanor Ashworth above the mantelpiece, her painted eyes following visitors with an expression of faint disapproval. Grandfather sat in his chair by the fire, a blanket across his knees, his cane propped against the armrest. He gestured impatiently toward the chair opposite. "Sit. Do not hover." "I cannot stand hovering." I sat. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. He studied me with those sharp, assessing eyes. I studied him in return. Looking for some trace of the grandfather I remembered from childhood. The man who had lifted me onto his shoulders to see the Christmas tree. The man who had taught me to play chess, and praised me when I finally beat him. The man who had, once upon a time, made me feel like the most important person in the world. That man was gone. If he had ever truly existed. "You are wondering why I summoned you," he said finally. "I am wondering many things." "Good. Curiosity is a virtue. It runs in the family." He coughed, a dry rattling sound that shook his entire frame. "I am dying, Catherine. You know this. The doctors have given me weeks at most. Perhaps days. And before I go, there are things I must set right. Things you must confess." His eyes flashed. "Careful. I may be dying, but I am still the head of this family. I still command respect. Respect is earned, grandfather. Not demanded." He stared at me. Then, incredibly, he laughed. A brief, harsh sound that dissolved into another coughing fit. "You are exactly like your mother," he said when he recovered. "Eleanor was the only one who ever dared to challenge me. The only one with any spine." He paused. "I thought I hated her for it. I thought I was punishing her when I drove her away. But I was wrong. I was punishing myself. And I have been paying for that mistake ever since." "Why did you drive her away? What did she do that was so unforgivable?" "It was not what she did. It was what she knew." He leaned forward, his voice dropping to a whisper. "Your mother discovered a secret, Catherine. A secret I had kept hidden for nearly 50 years. A secret that could have destroyed this family, this house, everything the Ashworth name represents." "What secret?" "That is what I am going to tell you. What I am going to tell all of you, tomorrow evening. At the reading of my will." He sat back, exhausted. "I have written everything down. The truth. The whole truth. It is sealed in my safe, along with documents that will prove every word. Tomorrow night, after dinner, my solicitor will read the will. And then he will read my confession." "Why not tell us now?" "Why the ceremony?" "Because I want to see their faces." His lips curved in something that was not quite a smile. "All of them. Margot and her grasping husband. Your brother and his ambitions. Evelyn and her decades of silent suffering. Julian, who thinks I do not see how much he despises me. All of them, gathered together, when the truth finally comes out. And me? Why am I here? Because you are the only one I trust. He reached out and gripped my hand. His fingers were cold, the bones sharp beneath papery skin. I have made you my executor, Catherine. When I am gone, you will control everything. The estate. The money. The secrets. You will decide what happens next. I do not want that responsibility. I know. That is precisely why I am giving it to you. He released my hand and slumped back in his chair. Now go. Send Julian to me. I need to discuss the arrangements for tomorrow. I stood. At the door, I paused. Grandfather. This secret. This truth you are going to reveal. Is it worth dying for? He looked at me with eyes that had seen 8 decades of triumph and tragedy, love and loss, hope and despair. That, he said quietly, is what we are about to find out. I left the room and closed the door behind me. In the corridor, I leaned against the wall and tried to slow my racing heart. I had come to this house expecting, I do not know what I expected. Reconciliation, perhaps. Closure. Instead, I had found myself at the center of a web I did not understand, surrounded by people who wanted something I could not name, waiting for a revelation that might tear this family apart. And somewhere, hidden in the shadows, was the person who would soon decide that my grandfather's secrets must die with him. If you are finding yourself pulled into this story, take a moment to like this video. Your engagement helps others discover these mysteries, and it means more than you know. Now, let me tell you what happened next. The rest of that first day passed in uneasy silence. I avoided my family as much as possible, retreating to my old bedroom in the West Wing, unpacking my small suitcase, trying to find something familiar in a room that had been stripped of everything personal. The books I had left behind were gone. The photographs removed. Even the curtains had been changed, the cheerful yellow I remembered replaced with heavy burgundy that blocked out the gray winter light. At 6 o'clock, a gong sounded for dinner. I descended the stairs to find the family assembled in the drawing room. Margot stood by the fireplace, a glass of sherry in her hand, her face rigid with displeasure. Gerald sprawled on the sofa, nursing a whiskey, his cheeks already flushed with drink. Julian stood by the window, staring out at the snow that had begun to fall. Evelyn sat alone in a corner, her hands folded, her expression unreadable. And there, leaning against the mantelpiece with a cigarette in his hand, was my brother Robert. He had not changed. The same dark hair, the same sharp features, the same mocking smile that never quite reached his eyes. He was 30 years old now, but he carried himself like a much younger man, someone who believed the world owed him something and was perpetually disappointed by its failure to deliver. Katie. He used the childhood nickname I hated. You actually came. I told Julian you would not have the nerve. I go where I am summoned, Robert. Unlike some. His smile tightened. Still holding grudges, I see. How exhausting for you. Children. Margot's voice cut through the room like a blade. We are here at your grandfather's request. I suggest we behave with a minimum of civility until this farce is concluded. Farce, Aunt Margot? I turned to face her. Is that what you call a dying man's last wish? I call it what it is. A manipulation. Edward has been controlling this family for 60 years. Did you think death would make him any less controlling? Before I could respond, the dining room doors opened, and the butler appeared. Dinner is served. We filed into the dining room in awkward silence. The table was set for 7, candles burning in silver holders, the family crystal gleaming in the firelight. I noticed that grandfather's chair at the head of the table remained empty. He would not be joining us. He was too weak, Julian explained quietly. He was taking his meals in his room. We sat. And for the next 2 hours, I watched my family circle around the truth like vultures waiting for a carcass to stop breathing. Margot dominated the conversation, steering every topic toward the estate, the will, the question of inheritance. Gerald supported her with clumsy enthusiasm, making comments about property values and investment opportunities that made Julian visibly cringe. Robert said little, content to drink wine and observe, his dark eyes missing nothing. Evelyn remained silent, eating mechanically, her gaze fixed on her plate. And I sat in the middle of it all, watching, listening, cataloging. Something was very wrong in this house. It was not just the tension between family members, though that was palpable enough. It was something else. Something darker. I felt it in the way Gerald's eyes slid toward Margot whenever money was mentioned. In the tightness around Julian's mouth when he spoke of his mother. In the strange, secretive glances Robert kept throwing at Evelyn, who steadfastly refused to acknowledge his existence. They all knew something. Or suspected something. And none of them were willing to say it aloud. After dinner, I excused myself and went to my room. I could not sleep. At midnight, I rose and put on my robe. The house was silent, but I could not shake the feeling that I was being watched. That somewhere in these shadowed corridors, something was waiting. I decided to walk. I wandered through the house, retracing paths I had known as a child. The library with its leather-bound volumes and secret passage behind the third bookcase on the left. The conservatory with its dying plants and broken glass panes. The portrait gallery with its rows of disapproving ancestors, generation after generation of Ashworth staring down at me with cold painted eyes. I ended up, almost by accident, outside grandfather's room. A light burned beneath the door. I raised my hand to knock. Paused. Voices. Low. Urgent. Two people speaking in hushed tones. I leaned closer. You cannot do this. The voice was familiar. Male. Desperate. After everything I have done for you. After everything I have sacrificed. My decision is final. Grandfather's voice, weak but implacable. The will is written. The truth will come out. Nothing you say will change that. Then you leave me no choice. A pause. Long, heavy with meaning. Is that a threat? It is a statement of fact. If you proceed with this, you will destroy everything. Everything, do you understand? And I cannot allow that. You cannot allow. Grandfather laughed, a thin, bitter sound. You forget yourself. You forget who you are speaking to. You forget what I know. And you forget what I am capable of. Footsteps. Moving toward the door. I stepped back, pressing myself into the shadows of an alcove. The door opened. A figure emerged. Tall. Male. Moving quickly. I did not see his face. But I knew, with sudden terrible certainty, that I had just heard someone threaten my grandfather's life. I did not sleep that night. I sat in my room until dawn, watching the snow fall past my window, turning the words over and over in my mind. You leave me no choice. I cannot allow that. You forget what I am capable of. Who had been in that room with grandfather? The voice had been male, but distorted by the heavy door. It could have been Julian. It could have been Gerald. It could have been Robert. Any of them had motive. All of them wanted something from grandfather's will. And all of them, I was beginning to realize, had secrets they would kill to protect. Morning came, gray and cold. The snow had stopped, but the world outside my window was buried in white. Drifts piled against the garden walls. The drive was invisible beneath the powder. No cars would be traveling today. We were trapped. I dressed and went down to breakfast. Only Julian was there, sitting alone at the long table, stirring a cup of coffee he did not seem interested in drinking. You look terrible, he said. I did not sleep. Neither did I. He gestured to the chair beside him. Sit. I need to tell you something. I sat. Julian was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, I heard them arguing last night. Grandfather and someone else. I do not know who. But I heard enough to know that someone in this house is very afraid of what grandfather is planning to reveal. What did you hear? Fragments. Threats. Someone saying that they would not allow the truth to come out. Someone saying that grandfather had left them no choice. He looked at me, and I saw real fear in his eyes. Catherine, I think someone is planning to hurt him. Or worse. We should warn him. I tried. This morning, before dawn. I went to his room. Julian swallowed. The door was locked. He would not answer. And when I asked the servants, they said he had given strict instructions not to be disturbed until this evening. For the reading of the will. Yes. Julian's voice dropped to a whisper. Whatever happens today, it is going to happen tonight. After the will is read. After the secret is revealed. Someone in this house is desperate enough to kill to keep that secret buried. And I do not know who. We need to protect him. How? We do not know who the threat is coming from. It could be anyone. My mother. Gerald. Robert. Even Evelyn. Any of them could be the one who was in that room last night. Not Evelyn. She has nothing to gain. Are you certain? Julian's eyes met mine. None of us know why she was exiled. None of us know what she knows. What if her secret is the secret grandfather is planning to reveal? What if she has more to lose than any of us? I opened my mouth to argue. Then closed it. He was right. I did not know Evelyn. I did not know anyone in this house. Not really. 7 years away had turned my family into strangers. And one of those strangers was prepared to commit murder. What do? We watch. We wait. And we pray that we can stop whatever is about to happen before it is too late. It was already too late. But we would not know that until midnight, when the house fell silent and death came creeping through the corridors of Ashworth Manor. What I am about to tell you next is the heart of this mystery. The moment when everything changed. Stay with me until the end, because the truth is closer than you think. And if this story is keeping you on the edge of your seat, share it with someone who loves a good mystery. Now, let me continue. The day crept past with agonizing slowness. Lunch was a tense affair. Margot complained about the cold. Gerald drank too much wine. Robert disappeared immediately afterward, claiming he needed to make telephone calls. Evelyn retreated to her room and did not emerge. At 4 o'clock, the solicitor arrived. His name was Mr. Hartley. A small, precise man in a dark suit, carrying a leather briefcase that presumably contained grandfather's will. He was shown to grandfather's study and remained there for nearly an hour. When he emerged, his face was pale and his hands were trembling. Is everything in order? Julian asked. Mr. Hartley adjusted his spectacles. That is not for me to say. I am merely here to read what Lord Ashworth has written. The interpretation, the consequences, those are matters for the family. What consequences? Margot demanded. What has he written? You will find out tonight, Mrs. Ashworth. At 8 o'clock. In the library. Those are Lord Ashworth's instructions. He disappeared into the guest wing, and we did not see him again until dinner. The hours that followed were the longest of my life. I walked the grounds despite the cold, needing to escape the suffocating atmosphere of the house. The snow was deep, the paths barely visible, but I pressed on, making my way to the old rose garden where my mother and I used to walk when I was a child. It was there that Evelyn found me. She appeared without warning, emerging from the white landscape like a ghost, her blue coat the only splash of color against the endless gray and white. Catherine. She stopped a few feet away. May I walk with you? I nodded. We walked in silence for a while, our breath clouding in the frozen air. Finally, I could bear it no longer. Tell me the truth, I said. Tell me what grandfather is planning to reveal. Tell me why you were exiled. Evelyn was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was barely audible above the wind. Your grandfather committed a crime, she said. 50 years ago. A crime so terrible that he has spent his entire life hiding it. Building walls around it. Destroying anyone who came too close to discovering it. What crime? He killed someone. She stopped walking and turned to face me. He killed my father. His own brother. For this house. For the money. For the Ashworth name. And he let an innocent man take the blame. I stared at her. The words did not make sense. They refused to arrange themselves into meaning. That is impossible, I said. Great-uncle William died in a hunting accident. Everyone knows that. Everyone knows a lie. Evelyn's eyes burned with decades of suppressed fury. I discovered the truth 20 years ago. I found letters. Documents. Proof. And when I confronted your grandfather, he gave me a choice. Leave this family forever and keep silent, or watch him destroy everyone I loved. She paused. I had children, Catherine. Young children. A husband. A life. I chose to protect them. And now? Now I am old. My children are grown. My husband is dead. And your grandfather, in his final days, has decided to confess. To set the record straight. To clear the name of the innocent man who was hanged for his crime. But why now? After all these years? Because he wants forgiveness. She laughed, a sound without humor. He thinks that confessing before he dies will absolve him. That telling the truth will somehow erase 50 years of lies. But some sins cannot be forgiven, Catherine. Some debts cannot be repaid. Who else knows? Who else in this house knows what he did? Evelyn was silent for a long moment. Then she said, that is what I have been trying to determine. Someone knows. Someone has always known. And that someone is very afraid of what tonight will bring. The person in grandfather's room last night. She looked at me sharply. You heard them. Fragments. Threats. Someone said he would leave them no choice. Evelyn nodded slowly. Then we are both thinking the same thing. One of them is planning to stop the confession. By whatever means necessary. We need to warn grandfather. He will not listen. He is too proud. Too stubborn. He believes he is in control, even now. She took my hand, her fingers icy through her gloves. But you can protect him, Catherine. You can watch. You can be ready. And when the moment comes, you can act. How do you know I can trust you? How do I know you are not the one who threatened him? Evelyn looked at me with those blue eyes, so like my mother's, so like my own. You do not know, she said. That is the terrible truth of family. We never truly know each other. We only choose to believe. She released my hand and walked away, disappearing into the white landscape as silently as she had come. I stood alone in the rose garden, the cold seeping into my bones, and wondered which of my family members was capable of murder. The answer, I was about to learn, was more than one. The grandfather clock in the entrance hall struck 8, and the sound echoed through Ashworth Manor like a death knell. We gathered in the library as instructed. The fire had been lit, but it did little to dispel the chill that hung in the air. Heavy velvet curtains blocked the windows. The walls of books seemed to press inward, thousands of leather spines bearing witness to what was about to unfold. Margot sat in the wingback chair nearest the fire, Gerald hovering behind her like a loyal hound. Robert stood by the drinks cabinet, pouring himself a whiskey with hands that were not quite steady. Julian paced near the door, his face pale with anxiety. Evelyn had claimed a seat in the corner, half hidden in shadow, her eyes fixed on the empty chair at the head of the room. Grandfather's chair. Mr. Hartley stood beside a small table on which rested his leather briefcase. He had removed a sheaf of documents and arranged them with the precision of a man who understood that what he was about to read would change lives forever. We waited. At 12 minutes past 8, the library door opened. And grandfather walked in. He was supported on one side by his valet, a man named Simmons who had served this family for 40 years. But despite his frailty, despite the way his body trembled with each step, there was something in grandfather's bearing that commanded attention. He was dying. We all knew it. But he was not dead yet. And until his last breath, he intended to be master of this house. They helped him into his chair. He waved Simmons away with an impatient gesture. Then he looked at each of us in turn, his sharp eyes moving from face to face, cataloging reactions, measuring fear. "You are all wondering why I summoned you," he said. His voice was thin, but it carried. "You are all wondering what I am about to reveal. Some of you already suspect. Some of you know. And some of you," he paused, "are very afraid." Nobody spoke. Grandfather nodded slowly. "Good. Fear is appropriate. What I am about to tell you will destroy the illusions you have lived with your entire lives. It will change how you see this family, this house, and yourselves. But it is the truth. And the truth, whatever its cost, is always better than a lie." He turned to Mr. Hartley. "Read the will." Mr. Hartley cleared his throat. He lifted the first document with hands that trembled slightly. "I, Edward Charles Ashworth, being of sound mind and failing body, do hereby declare this to be my last will and testament, revoking all previous wills and codicils." He continued reading. The legal language was dense, full of whereas and heretofores, but the substance was clear enough. The estate, the house, the land, the investments, the art, the jewels, everything was to be placed in a trust. And the sole trustee, with complete authority over all assets and their distribution, was me. Catherine Eleanor Ashworth. The silence that followed was absolute. Then Margot spoke. "This is outrageous." Her voice shook with fury. "She has been absent for 7 years. She has no connection to this family, no loyalty, no right to control our inheritance. She has every right." Grandfather's voice cut through Margot's protest like a blade. "She is the only one of you I trust. The only one who has not spent the past decade scheming and plotting and waiting for me to die so you could get your hands on my money. Father, that is unfair. Is it?" He turned his sharp gaze on her. "Shall I tell everyone about the documents you forged last year, trying to have me declared incompetent? Shall I tell them about the care home you had already selected, the one that would have given you power of attorney over all my affairs?" Margot went white. Gerald's hand tightened on her shoulder. "Or perhaps," grandfather continued, "we should discuss your husband's investment scheme. The one that requires Ashworth Capital to keep from collapsing. The one that is currently under investigation by the fraud office." Gerald's face flushed crimson. "That is a lie. A damnable lie. I have the documents, Mr. Ashworth." Grandfather smiled, and there was no warmth in it. "I have had investigators watching all of you for months. I know about the debts. The affairs. The secrets you thought were hidden." He paused. "I know everything." The room had gone very still. I felt the weight of eyes upon me. resentment, hatred, fear. But grandfather was not finished. However, he said, none of that is why I have gathered you here tonight. The will is merely business. What comes next is something else entirely. He nodded to Mr. Hartley. Read the confession. Mr. Hartley's face had gone gray. He lifted a second document. His hands were shaking badly now. I, Edward Charles Ashworth, do hereby confess to the murder of my brother, William Henry Ashworth, on the 14th of September, 1904. The words fell into the room like stones into still water. Ripples of shock spread across every face. Margot gasped. Gerald's mouth fell open. Robert's glass slipped from his fingers and shattered on the floor. Julian stood frozen, his face a mask of disbelief. Only Evelyn remained still. She had known. She had carried this truth for 20 years. Mr. Hartley continued reading. On the night in question, my brother and I argued over our father's will. William was to inherit the estate. I was to receive nothing. In a moment of rage, I struck him with a poker from the fireplace. He fell and did not rise. I staged the scene to look like an accident. A fall during a hunting expedition. And when suspicion fell upon a local poacher named Thomas Gray, I did nothing to prevent his arrest, his trial, or his execution. Evelyn made a small sound. I looked at her and saw tears streaming down her face. Thomas Gray was my father, she whispered. I was 5 years old when they hanged him. The room erupted. Margot was shouting at grandfather, demanding to know how he could have kept this secret, how he could have let their entire lives be built on a lie. Gerald was trying to calm her, but his own face was twisted with calculation, already working out how this confession would affect the family's reputation, the estate's value, his own precarious position. Robert had gone very pale and very quiet, staring at grandfather with an expression I could not read. Julian looked like a man whose world had collapsed around him. And through it all, grandfather sat in his chair, watching, waiting, a faint smile on his thin lips. Enough. His voice was not loud, but it cut through the chaos like a knife. Enough. You have heard the truth. Now you must live with it. As I have lived with it for 50 years. Why? Julian's voice cracked. Why tell us now? Why not take this secret to your grave? Because I am tired. Grandfather's voice was suddenly weary. Tired of the lies. Tired of the fear. Tired of watching this family destroy itself with greed and suspicion and hatred. He looked at me. I have given Catherine control of everything because I believe she will do what is right. She will decide how to make amends for what I have done. She will decide whether to make this confession public. She will decide whether the Ashworth name deserves to survive. And if she decides to destroy us? Margot's voice was venomous. If she decides to give everything away, to drag our name through the mud, to ruin us all? Then that is her choice. Grandfather met Margot's glare without flinching. And you will have no one to blame but yourselves. And me. He rose from his chair. It took great effort. His entire body shook with the strain. But he rose. I am going to my room now. Tomorrow, we will discuss the practical implications of what I have revealed. Tonight, I suggest you all take time to reflect on who you are and who you wish to become. He paused at the door. Good night. He left. And the family he left behind began to tear itself apart. The hours that followed were chaos. Margot and Gerald retreated to their room, their raised voices audible through the walls. Robert disappeared, taking a bottle of whiskey with him. Julian sat alone in the drawing room, staring at nothing. Evelyn remained in the library, weeping quietly, finally able to grieve for the father she had lost to a lie. And I wandered the corridors of Ashworth Manor, trying to make sense of what I had learned. My grandfather was a murderer. The fortune I had just inherited was built on blood. The family I belonged to was founded on a crime so terrible that an innocent man had died for it. What was I supposed to do with that knowledge? How was I supposed to live with it? I found myself standing outside grandfather's room. The light beneath the door had gone out. He was sleeping, perhaps. Or simply lying in the darkness, waiting for death to come. I raised my hand to knock. And then I heard it. A sound. Soft. Muffled. Coming from inside the room. A sound like someone gasping for breath. Grandfather? No answer. I tried the door. It was locked. Grandfather, can you hear me? Nothing. Then, a thud. Something heavy falling to the floor. I threw myself against the door. Once. Twice. The old wood splintered. On the third attempt, the lock gave way, and I stumbled into the room. The fire had burned down to embers. The room was cold. The curtains were open, and pale moonlight streamed through the windows, illuminating the figure sprawled on the floor beside the bed. Grandfather. I ran to him. Knelt beside him. His face was contorted in agony. His lips were blue. His hands clutched at his chest, fingers curled like claws. He was dying. Right in front of me. And there was nothing I could do. Catherine. His voice was barely a whisper. He was here. He. Who? Who was here? But he could not answer. His eyes rolled back. His body convulsed once. And then he was still. Lord Edward Ashworth, murderer and patriarch, died in my arms at 11 minutes past midnight on Christmas Eve. Exactly as someone had planned. I do not know how long I knelt there, holding my grandfather's body, feeling the last warmth fade from his flesh. Time seemed to stop. The world contracted to that single moment. Death and silence and the terrible weight of things left unsaid. Then I heard footsteps in the corridor. Julian appeared in the doorway. He took in the scene with a single glance. His face went white. Is he dead? Yes. Julian crossed the room and knelt beside me. He checked for a pulse, though we both knew there would be none. His heart, Julian said. It must have been his heart. No. I shook my head. Someone was in this room. He told me. He said, he was here. Someone killed him. Catherine, you are in shock. His heart was failing. We knew this was coming. I looked at Julian. Really looked at him. His face was pale. His hands were steady. His voice was calm. Too calm. Where were you? I asked. Just now. Where were you when he died? In the drawing room. I have been there for hours. You can ask anyone. There is no one to ask. Everyone retreated to their rooms after the reading. Julian's expression flickered. Just for a moment. Then it was gone, replaced by concern. Catherine, you need to rest. You have had a terrible shock. In the morning, we will call the doctor. We will sort everything out. I will sort everything out. I stood. He made me executor. He gave me control. And I am going to find out what happened here tonight. Julian rose slowly. His eyes met mine. Be careful, Catherine, he said quietly. You do not know what you are getting into. You do not know what this family is capable of. Then I will find out. I walked past him, out of the room, and into the darkness of the corridor. Behind me, my grandfather's body lay cooling in the moonlight. And somewhere in this house, his killer was already planning their next move. The next few hours were a blur of activity and horror. I woke the household. I summoned Dr. Pemberton from the village, though the roads were nearly impassable with snow. I called the police, though I knew they would likely dismiss my suspicions. An old man with a failing heart, dying in his sleep. What could be more natural? But I knew. I knew in my bones that this was not natural. Someone had been in that room. Someone had ensured that grandfather would not live to see Christmas morning. And I was going to prove it. The doctor arrived at dawn. He examined the body, asked questions, made notes. His preliminary verdict was exactly what I expected. Heart failure, he said, closing his bag. Given his condition, it is a miracle he lasted this long. I am sorry, Miss Ashworth. There was nothing anyone could have done. I want an autopsy. The doctor blinked. I beg your pardon? An autopsy. A proper examination. I want to know exactly how he died. Miss Ashworth, that is highly irregular. There are no signs of foul play. No evidence of violence. His heart simply gave out. Nonetheless, I want it done. Dr. Pemberton looked at me for a long moment. Then he sighed. Very well. I will make the arrangements. But I must warn you, Miss Ashworth. You may not like what we find. I already do not like it, Doctor. That is the point. He left. And I began my investigation. I started with the room itself. Grandfather's bedroom. The scene of his death. I searched every corner, every drawer, every shadow. And in the wastepaper basket beside his desk, I found something. A handkerchief. White linen. Monogrammed with the initials G.A. Gerald Ashworth. My heart began to pound. I lifted the handkerchief carefully, handling it by the edges. It smelled faintly of cologne. Gerald's cologne. I had noticed it the first time we met. Gerald had been in this room. I continued searching. In the drawer of grandfather's bedside table, I found a bottle of pills. His heart medication. The bottle was nearly empty. But according to the date on the label, it should have been half full. Someone had been taking his pills. Or giving him too many. I sat on the edge of the bed, my mind racing. Digitalis, the medication grandfather took for his heart, was a double-edged sword. In proper doses, it strengthened the heartbeat. In excessive doses, it could cause the heart to race uncontrollably, leading to cardiac arrest. If someone had been secretly increasing his dosage, it would look exactly like natural heart failure. Gerald had motive. The investment scheme grandfather had mentioned was on the verge of collapse. Without Ashworth money to prop it up, Gerald would face financial ruin. Perhaps even prison. But Gerald was not clever enough to plan something like this. Not subtle enough. He was a blunt instrument, not a surgeon. Which meant he had an accomplice. And I had a very good idea who that accomplice might be. I found Margot in the conservatory, standing among the dying plants, staring out at the snow-covered gardens. She did not turn when I entered. He is dead, she said. After all these years. After all the waiting. He is finally dead. You do not sound grief-stricken. Should I be? He was a monster, Catherine. He killed his own brother. He let an innocent man hang. He spent his entire life manipulating and controlling everyone around him. She finally turned to face me. I am not sorry he is dead. I am only sorry it took so long. Where were you last night? Between midnight and when I found him? In my room. With Gerald. Her eyes narrowed. Why? Because someone was in grandfather's room when he died. He told me. He said, he was here. And you suspect me. Should I not? Margot laughed. It was a cold sound, utterly without warmth. My dear child, if I had wanted to kill my father, would have done it years ago. I certainly would not have waited until he had disinherited me and given everything to you. She stepped closer. You are looking in the wrong direction, Catherine. I am many things, but I am not a murderer. What about Gerald? Something flickered in her eyes. Fear. Quickly suppressed. Gerald was with me all night. Can anyone confirm that? We were in our room. Alone. She paused. But I failed to see how his handkerchief ended up in Father's bedroom if he never left my side. I stared at her. How do you know about the handkerchief? Margot's face went very still. And in that moment, I understood. You searched the room. Before the doctor arrived. You found the handkerchief and you left it there, knowing I would find it. You wanted me to suspect Gerald. Margot said nothing. Why? What are you hiding? Nothing that concerns you. Everything in this house concerns me now. Grandfather made sure of that. Margot's composure cracked. Just for a moment. I saw the fear beneath. The desperation. Leave it alone, Catherine. She stepped back. Some secrets are not worth uncovering. Some truths are better left buried. Like the truth about what really happened last night. She did not answer. She turned and walked away, her heels clicking on the tile floor, leaving me alone among the dying plants. I was close to the truth. I could feel it. But there was one more person I needed to speak with. One more piece of the puzzle. I found Robert in the wine cellar. He was sitting on an old crate, a bottle open beside him, a glass in his hand. He did not look up when I descended the stairs. I wondered how long it would take you to find me, he said. You always were the clever one. I need to ask you something. I assumed as much. He took a long drink from his glass. Ask. I may even tell you the truth. It seems to be a night for confessions. Where were you when grandfather died? Robert was silent for a long moment. Then he said, in his room. My heart stopped. What? I was in his room. With him. When he died. Robert finally looked up at me. His eyes were red. His face was haggard. I watched him take his last breath. And I did nothing to stop it. You killed him. No. Robert shook his head. I did not kill him. But I knew someone was going to. And I did not warn him. Who? Who killed him? Robert stood. He set down his glass. He walked toward me, and in the dim light of the cellar, his face looked like a stranger's. Julian, he said. Julian killed him. The word struck me like a physical blow. Julian. My cousin. My childhood friend. The one person in this house I had allowed myself to trust. You are lying. I wish I were. Robert's voice was flat. Dead. I saw him. I was in the corridor outside grandfather's room, trying to work up the courage to go in and confront him about the will. And I saw Julian slip inside. I heard them arguing. And then I heard nothing at all. Why did you not stop him? Because I wanted grandfather dead too. Robert's face twisted with something that might have been shame. We all wanted him dead, Catherine. Every single one of us. Julian just had the courage to actually do it. Or the desperation. Robert nodded slowly. His mother. Margot. She has been in Julian's ear for years. Convincing him that grandfather was going to disinherit the whole family. That the only way to protect their position was to act before it was too late. He paused. Julian did not know about the confession. He did not know that grandfather was planning to reveal the truth about William's murder. He thought he was protecting the family fortune. Instead, he has destroyed everything. I leaned against the cold stone wall. My legs felt weak. My head was spinning. Julian. Julian, who had comforted me. Julian, who had warned me to be careful. Julian, who had been the first to reach grandfather's room after I found the body. Julian, who had looked into my eyes and told me I did not know what this family was capable of. He had been talking about himself. I found Julian in the East Garden. He was standing beneath the old oak tree where we had played as children, his hands shoved in his pockets, his breath clouding in the frozen air. He did not turn when I approached. "You know," he said. "Robert told you." "Yes." He nodded slowly. "I thought he might." Robert never could keep a secret. Not the ones that mattered. "Why, Julian? Why did you do it?" For a long moment, he did not answer. The wind howled across the frozen landscape. Snow began to fall again, soft flakes drifting down from a gray sky. "Because my mother told me I had to." His voice was quiet. Defeated. "She said grandfather was going to give everything to you. That we would be left with nothing. That our only chance was to stop him before he could change the will." But the will was already written. I had already been named executor. I did not know that. Julian finally turned to face me. "I did not know about the confession. I did not know about any of it. Mother said, she said if I loved her, if I wanted to protect our family, I would do what needed to be done." "So you killed him?" "I gave him his pills." Julian's voice cracked. "I crushed them up and put them in his evening brandy. Enough to make his heart give out. Enough to look like natural causes. He was dying anyway, Catherine. I told myself I was just speeding up the inevitable. I told myself it was mercy. Mercy." I stared at him. "You murdered our grandfather and you call it mercy." "I call it desperation." He took a step toward me, and I saw tears streaming down his face. "I call it fear. I call it a lifetime of being told I was not good enough, not strong enough, not clever enough. I call it a mother who made me believe that the only way to earn her love was to become a monster. That is not an excuse. No. It is not." He wiped his face with the back of his hand. "But it is the truth. The only truth I have left." We stood in silence. The snow fell around us, covering everything in white. Finally, I spoke. "I am going to call the police. You are going to tell them everything. And then you are going to face the consequences of what you have done." Julian nodded slowly. "I know." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. "But before you do, I want you to read this." It was in grandfather's desk. "I found it this morning, after you told me about the investigation." I took the paper. Unfolded it. "Read." It was a letter. Addressed to me. In grandfather's shaking hand. "My dearest Catherine. If you are reading this, I am dead. And if I am dead, it is because someone in this family has decided that my secrets are too dangerous to be revealed. Do not grieve for me. I have lived a long and terrible life. I have done things that cannot be forgiven. I have caused suffering that cannot be undone. My death, however it comes, is simply the final act of a tragedy I set in motion 50 years ago. But you, Catherine. You are innocent. You carry none of my sins. And that is why I have chosen you to be the keeper of this family's future. You will find documents in my safe that prove everything I have confessed. You will find evidence of every crime, every cover-up, every lie. You have the power to destroy this family or to save it. But before you decide, I want you to understand something. Secrets are poison, Catherine. They start small. A single lie. A single omission. But they grow. They spread. They corrupt everything they touch. I kept my secret for 50 years, and in those 50 years, it destroyed everyone I loved. My wife. My children. My grandchildren. All of them, twisted and warped by the weight of something they could not see but could always feel. Do not make my mistake. Do not let the lies continue. Tell the truth, Catherine. Whatever the cost. Tell the truth and set this family free. Your grandfather. Edward. I lowered the letter. My eyes were burning. He knew. He knew someone might try to stop him. And he wrote this anyway. He wanted you to finish what he started. Julian's voice was barely audible. He wanted you to tell the truth, even if he could not. I looked at my cousin. The man who had murdered my grandfather. The boy I had once considered my closest friend. And I understood, finally, what I had to do. The police arrived that afternoon. I told them everything. About the will. About the confession. About Julian's crime and Margot's manipulation and the 50 years of lies that had poisoned this family from within. They arrested Julian. They took Margot in for questioning. Gerald fled in his car and was apprehended at the Scottish border, trying to escape the fraud investigation that was finally closing in. And I stood in the entrance hall of Ashworth Manor, watching my family crumble, and felt something I had not expected. Relief. Evelyn found me there, hours later. It is over, she said quietly. Is it? The truth is out. After 50 years. My father's name will be cleared. The real murderer will be known. She paused. That is more than I ever dared hope for. But look at the cost. I gestured at the empty house. The family is destroyed. Julian will go to prison. Margot may follow. Robert has already left, saying he never wants to see this place again. And I am alone, holding the pieces of something that can never be put back together. Evelyn took my hand. You are not holding pieces, Catherine. You are holding the beginning of something new. I do not understand. Your grandfather was a murderer. But he was also, at the very end, a man who chose truth over comfort. He could have died with his secrets. He could have let the lies continue forever. But he did not. He chose to confess. He chose to give you the power to make things right. And what am I supposed to do with that power? Whatever you decide. Evelyn squeezed my hand. You can sell this house and give the money to the descendants of the innocent man who was hanged. You can establish a foundation in my father's name. You can tear down the walls and let the ghosts finally rest. Or I can walk away. Pretend none of this ever happened. You could. Evelyn looked at me with those blue eyes, so like my mother's, so like my own. But you will not. Because you are not like the rest of them. You understand that some debts must be paid. Some wrongs must be acknowledged. Some truths must be spoken, no matter how much they hurt. I stood in silence for a long moment. Thinking about my grandfather. About the crime he committed 50 years ago. About the confession he wrote in his final days. About the letter he left for me, urging me to tell the truth and set this family free. And I made my decision. The confession was published the following spring. I gave it to every newspaper that would print it. I testified before courts and inquiries. I opened the Ashworth archives to historians and researchers. And I watched as the name that had been synonymous with wealth and power became synonymous with something else. Truth. The descendants of Thomas Gray, the innocent man who was hanged for my great-uncle's murder, received compensation from the estate. Not because the law required it. But because it was right. Julian was convicted of manslaughter and sentenced to 12 years in prison. I visited him once, 6 months after the trial. He did not ask for forgiveness, and I did not offer it. But I told him that I understood. That I knew he had been shaped by forces beyond his control. That I hoped, someday, he would find peace. Margot died 2 years later. A stroke, the doctors said. But I believe she simply could not bear to live in a world where her secrets had been exposed and her power had been broken. Robert rebuilt his life in Canada. We exchange letters occasionally. He is married now, with 2 children. He has not returned to England since the day he left Ashworth Manor. And Evelyn lived out her final years in a cottage on the grounds of the estate. She died peacefully, at 83, surrounded by her grandchildren. Her funeral was held in the village church, and for the first time in a century, her father's name was spoken with honor instead of shame. As for me, I sold Ashworth Manor. Not to a developer. Not to a stranger. But to the National Trust, who turned it into a museum. A place where visitors can learn about the history of the house, including the crimes that were committed within its walls. A place where the truth is told, openly and honestly, so that no one will ever forget. Sometimes I return there. I walk the corridors where I played as a child. I stand in the library where the will was read. I sit in the garden where I confronted Julian and learned the depth of his betrayal. And I remember. I remember my grandfather, a man who did terrible things and spent his final days trying to make amends. I remember my mother, who died never knowing that her father was a murderer. I remember Julian, who loved his mother so much that he became a monster to please her. And I remember the lesson that all of them, in their different ways, taught me. Secrets are poison. They start small. A single lie. A single omission. A single moment when we choose comfort over truth. But they grow. They spread. They corrupt everything they touch. They turn love into obligation, trust into suspicion, family into strangers. The only cure is truth. Painful, difficult, terrifying truth. The truth that costs us our comfort, our reputation, our place in the world. The truth that demands everything and promises nothing in return. But here is what I have learned. The truth, whatever its cost, is always worth paying. Because the truth is not just about facts. It is about freedom. The freedom to see ourselves clearly. The freedom to face our past without flinching. The freedom to build a future that is not weighed down by the lies we tell ourselves. My grandfather kept his secret for 50 years. And in those 50 years, he never knew a moment's peace. He was haunted by guilt, tormented by fear, isolated by the walls he built around his heart. But in his final days, when he chose to confess, something changed. He was still a murderer. He was still guilty. He still died alone, killed by his own grandson, in the house he had built on blood. But he died free. And that freedom, that terrible, beautiful freedom, is the only inheritance that matters. If this story has moved you, please share it with someone who needs to hear it. Leave a comment telling me what you thought. And subscribe to this channel so you never miss another mystery. Your engagement means everything to me, and I am so grateful you stayed until the end. This has been Mistletoe over the Manor. A story about secrets and lies. About family and betrayal. About the price of truth and the cost of silence. My name is Catherine Ashworth. And I hope, wherever you are, you have the courage to tell the truth. Even when it hurts. Especially when it hurts. Thank you for listening. Until next time. The snow fell gently on Ashworth Manor as the credits rolled, covering the old house in white, burying the past beneath a blanket of cold and silence. But somewhere, in the warmth of a London flat, a woman sat by the window, watching the snow fall, and smiled. Because the truth, finally, was free.